Hi, and welcome back to A Beginner's Guide to Toon Boom Harmony. Let's pick up where we left off last time and tackle the remaining important tools of vector drawing and, more importantly, how layers work in Toon Boom. Alright, so here we are back in the scene, and let's start to look at the tools I haven't mentioned yet. First you have the pencil tool right under the brush tool. The shortcut to access it is either hold slash or alt plus slash. It's a really weird shortcut, not very user-friendly, but it doesn't really matter because it's not the kind of tool you're going to need to access through shortcuts. When you're using it for a while, and you don't really need to switch off a lot, usually. So what's the difference between the pencil tool and the brush tool? Well, if you just trace a couple lines with the brush tool and pencil tool, you won't see a difference, and that's perfectly normal. But if I select with the select tool by holding Control, you can see that already the vectors that form the pencil tool and the brush tool look a little bit different. There are two kinds of vector lines that Toon Boom can create. There's the brush kind and the pencil kind, and we'll see why they are different when you use another tool, which is a contour editor, which I will use really shortly. So let's remove this. So this is the pencil tool. It has overall the same properties as the brush tool. It has, it has its own textures, its own brush presets, and all. And it also have some tool properties, but you can see that it doesn't have the repaint tool, and you'll see why. Next we have the line tool, and the shortcut to access it is even weirder. It's backslash, and I can't even do it on this keyboard because it's an Asiatic keyboard, because it's a French keyboard. So yeah, it doesn't work. It's supposed to... Yep, I can't access it via keyboard shortcut, but it's okay. Again, it's a tool that you're not going to use a lot anyways, and even if you do use, usually you don't need to switch off too much. Inside the line tool you have also rectangle, ellipses, and polylines. So the line, it just creates straight lines, and you can see that it is the same kind of line as the pencil tool, and this is the case for everything you can create from the tools within the line tool. Polyline is a little bit different. It's basically a way to create pencil lines using directly Bezier curve. It can be useful if you're doing some really precise inking. So these are the tools that create pencil lines, and now I'm going to use the contour editor tool to show you how they are different one to another. So I'll make a brush line here and a pencil line here, and now I'll select the contour editor tool. It's either by holding Q or Alt plus Q, and you see it's this white arrow here. What it allows you to do is it lets you select the points that creates the vectors from which your lines are created. And here, if I select the brush line here, you can see that the line is a shape which has a contour made of these dots, and it's all Bezier curve. It's just a shape made of points that create Bezier curve, and it's just a filling of that shape. However, the pencil line is a little bit different. It's it has sort of an anatomy to it. And so it is defined by this center vector. And this center vector creates a line with some thickness that comes around this curve. So the point is, this kind of line is better if you're trying to do some kind of inking in your drawing. And you're thinking, yeah, but how can I have control over the thickness of this kind of line? And this is where you can have access to a different tool. If you develop the white arrow here, you have the pencil editor. The shortcut to the pencil editor is either hold W or use Alt plus W. And you can see that the line appears with a different selection. And you'll see that you cannot select a line made with a brush using the pencil editor. It's specific to this kind of line, the kind of pencil lines. So only the ones created with the pencil tool or everything within the line tool. So pencil editor, what this does is it gives you control over the thickness of the contour of a line you created with the pencil tool or with the line tool. And this can be really useful if you do some inking where you need to be really precise with the thickness of your brushes. And you can see that the contour of this line is made of several points which are Bezier curves. Because it's vectors, and in vectors everything is a Bezier curve anyways. And you can see that you can give you can have control over the thickness of your line. And if you need to add a point, imagine you want line to be much thinner here, you hold Control, you can see a little plus appearing here, and you click on the center of the line. I mean, by default, you'd think you would click on the edge here, but actually you have to click on the center of the line here. And you can create your points. And because it's Bezier, you can have some really strange looking line if you want to. And if I go back to the contour editor, I can still modify the center path of this line. And this is the difference between a brush line and a pencil line. Now that we've seen that, let's see a tool that is pretty specific but extremely useful when you do inking in Toon Boom. So, if you're like me, maybe you're a little messy when you try to ink your piece of art, and you try to have these edges with sharp corner, and you're thinking, yeah, I'll use the eraser, and I'm going to do this sharp corner like that. And if you're like me, you'll have to control Z a lot to get it right, and even then it's not really great. Well, there's a tool that really helps you doing that, and it's the cutter tool. If I do these crossing lines like this, I use the cutter tool, which is under the black arrow here, or accessed using either holding T or Alt plus T. And now I have my cutter tool, and you can see that the icon of the cursor is the same as the selection tool, but it's normal. And what you can do with the cutter tool is either select a piece after it's crossed, and you can either move it or delete it, or if you just brush over it like that, it doesn't work every time. It's a bit of a weird behavior for the tool, but you can just go over it like that. Here you can see it didn't work straight away, and it will remove the edges, and it gives these crispy corners that are really good and really easy to achieve. And you can easily recognize this being used in many animations created in Toon Boom. It's really something that comes back a lot. So this is how it works in the brush tool. With the pencil tools, it's a little bit different. You'll see. It doesn't work nearly as well, because when you do it with the pencil tool, it will stop the line just as the two center vectors of this line and this line cross. And so you get this weird angle that's created. If you're going for some style that uses that, it can work, but in my opinion, the cutter tool is much better suited for inking with the brush tool. So that's it for these two things. And now let me open a parenthesis to talk a little bit about layers in Toon Boom and how we're going to use those layers to create for ourselves some kind of workflow to work with clean lines and clean filled in colors. Okay, so how layers work in Toon Boom. Basically, whenever you create a drawing layer, which is the kind of layer that you stack on your timeline, within these drawing layers, you also create 4 art layers. We call them art layers. It's basically 4 layers within your drawing layers in your timeline. To try to make things clear, I always refer to the one you create in timeline as drawing layer and the ones that are inside as art layers. And why it's made like that, it's so that when you animate and when you draw and when you start to do your inking and you have to colorize from your cleanup or your inking, it lets you have your lines and your colors separated, but on the same drawing layers, to not clutter your timeline too much. It's really useful. It's something that Toon Boom has had for a while, and it works really well. Now, let's see how this works and how we can make the best use of this. So, now that we've got this covered, let's go into our timeline and let's create a drawing layer. To create a drawing layer, you either click on this tiny icon here, Add Drawing Layer, or you use this shortcut, Ctrl-R, and you've got this popping up. And already, you might be saying, hey, this is not what I see. I don't have all these options, I only have 2. And that's because we need to activate something in the preferences. So, first thing first, you close this, you go to Edit, Preferences, Advanced, and you tick the first option up here, Support Overlay and Underlay Art. By default, even in Toon Boom Premium, you will only see 2 of your art layers, but if you activate this, you can see all 4 of your art layers. So once this is done, you create a layer, you give it a name, and you leave this the way it is, and click on Add and Close. And you have created your layer. To access the different art layers within your drawing layers, you use this tiny toolbar here. And you see that by default, you are on the line art layer. From bottom to top, there's underlay art, color art, line art, and overlay art. And if you draw in one of those, like for example, I draw in the color art, oops. If I draw above it on the line art, what I draw will appear above it. If I draw under it in the underlay art, what I will draw will appear under everything. So, simple enough. Now, the way we are going to use it, we are going to have our line art on the line art layer and our colors on the color art layer. So go into the line art layer, draw some shape that you close. Let's clean it up a bit. There you go. And now, if I go to the color art and try to fill this in with different color, let's say, nothing happens. And that's normal. That's because it's the same way it would work in Photoshop or any other software. You are trying to fill in on a layer where nothing is. But there is a way to take just the vectors, not the visual, not the line itself, but just the vectors of the line art and apply them to the color art or any other art layer to use them as, you could say, barriers to give the limits to where you are filling in the color. And to do that, you go into your line art, you select your drawing here, you can use Ctrl A to select everything within your camera view, and you click on this icon here, Create Color Art from Line Art. You do this, and once this is done, you can go into the color art, and you see that this blue vector has appeared. This blue vector will not show when you render your animation, but it's an invisible line that is based on what you have drawn on the line art. And here you have the vector showing in blue because there's the option to show vectors that is activated. You can activate it on any art layer, and you can switch it on and off using the shortcut K. And same for line art. If I press K, I can see the vectors appearing. So I have my vectors visible on the color art. I have my color. I have my fill tool. I can fill in the shape. I press K to deactivate the vectors to see how it looks in the final. And this is what we have. And we have a shape with a line art that is separated from the colors, and it's a good way to work with clean and well organized files. And that's it for the fundamentals of vector drawings and the fundamentals of managing layers. At this point, you should have enough knowledge to figure out yourself some workflow, some way to work with the layers, and You just, at this point, need to get used to it and figure out your own way to use all I've taught you in an inventive way and in a way that suits your style, suits the way you like to work, and so on. So, now that we've got this covered, we can move on to the next step. Join me next time as I go over the fundamentals of bitmap drawings in Toon Boom and the differences with vectors. Until then, make sure to practice with what you've learned so far, and take care.